What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 12. A lot of surprising and unexpected outcomes from this week, from the Kansas City Chiefs nearly losing to the Carolina Panthers. That's wild, but they still won the game, so we won't put it past them, but that could be a little red flag there. Also, the Tennessee Titans beating the Houston Texans in an upset win, despite Will Levis being sacked 8 times. That's crazy, but hey. But low-key, we might be putting some teams in fraud alert. The Texans, also the Washington Commanders, losing to the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, y'all know that's my favorite team, but it's really been embraced to tank for most of the season, but I'm low-key kind of happy they won the game in a sense, but kind of conflicted because I want to get Ashton Genty or Travis Hunter, but the Cowboys won that game, so shout out to Kevontae Turpin, went crazy on special teams. But moving past that game, there's a lot of hot teams in the NFL right now. From the Denver Broncos with Bo Nix. I know Jaden Daniels started off hot this season in the first half, and he's kind of tailed down a little bit. He was a unanimous favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year, but now Bo Nix is definitely challenging him, and if the Broncos can make the playoffs too, lucky be in a similar position as the Commanders, because they're probably going to be a wild card too, because the Eagles, they look really hot right now in the NFC. I know the Detroit Lions, they've been a runaway favorite probably for a lot of people to represent the NFC for the Super Bowl, but don't sleep on Philadelphia, especially with Saquon Barkley having a 200+ yard rushing game against the Los Angeles Rams, going nuclear. He's easily Offensive Player of the Year in my opinion, and should be a legit MVP candidate. I know it's a quarterback award, but Saquon Barkley has had a huge impact on the Eagles offense. So yeah, there's just a lot of games to talk about. Obviously Thursday Night Football too, the Browns beating the Steelers, and then all the way leading into Monday Night Football between the Ravens and the Los Angeles Chargers, the battle of the Harbaugh brothers. So there's just a lot of games to talk about, and I can't wait to break down every single one. But with that being said though, guys, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know we post about here videos about the NBA, Marvel, DC, pop culture, cooking videos, shorts, reels, things of that nature. With that being said, let's talk about NFL Week 12.
No lettuce, no lettuce, no. The Cleveland Browns got some more wins, baby. Let's get it. I just got to tell you, buddy. I just got off Amazon and I'm probably about to go and order a dub off Amazon. It's going to get here to my house by 9 o'clock tonight. That's how.
Man, shout out to Jameis Winston. The Cleveland Browns got a good win over the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of their divisional rivals, winning 24-19. The Browns are now 3-8, and now the Steelers are now 8-3, and not too much to play for the Browns. And they probably played up to this matchup for sure, I would say. The weather conditions, yes, they played a factor.
Just keep grinding. Like I said, conditions played a huge part in today's game. I don't really think the Cleveland Browns are a good team at all.
But that was salty, what George Pickens said. But anyways, we're not going to talk about that. And y'all are probably going to be like, of course you say that. But low-key, I kind of saw the Browns winning this game regardless. It was a trap game for the Steelers, a short week after playing against the Ravens in a hard-fought game in Week 11. And this ended up resulting into that. The Steelers are still first in the AFC North right now, so we'll see how the division really goes when they rematch against the Ravens. I'm not too crazy about the Steelers anyways. We know that they're going to make the playoffs for sure. But are they in the upper echelon of the AFC like the Chiefs are, like the Bills are, teams of that nature? This might not make sense, but even if the Steelers win a division over the Ravens, I still don't think they're more of a Super Bowl contender than the Baltimore Ravens. And you can, of course, argue the defense with TJ Watt, Highsmith, and all of them, but I'm just not believers in the offense. And Russell Wilson, I mean, he's been really good and serviceable, 4-1 in his starts this season so far, but I'm just not a believer in that offense. So the Browns, it's a good win for them. Jameis Winston had a rushing touchdown, and even with the weather conditions, the Browns were still slinging the football. Completed 18 out of 27 passing attempts for 219 passing yards. Nate Chubb had 2 touchdowns on 20 carries for 59 rushing yards. A huge game for him in terms of coming back, because he got injured against the Steelers early last year in the 2023 season, so good for him to get in the end zone a couple of times. For the Steelers, like I said, nothing too crazy. Russell Wilson, he threw for 270 passing yards and a touchdown. The Steelers did come back, but the Browns ended up persevering and getting a game-winning touchdown. Jalen Warren also had 45 rushing yards and a touchdown, but nothing too crazy from their offense. So the Steelers, they're still one of the best teams in the AFC, but like I said, I don't really view them as Super Bowl contenders. But shout out to Jameis Winston, man. How can you hate him? Got the Lord on his side for sure. Just love his quotes, and I think any locker room would love to have him, so it's a good win for Cleveland. But make no mistake, they're going to be drafting high. Transitioning to the Sunday games, we of course have to talk about that game in Houston that I mentioned in the intro. The Tennessee Titans beat the Texans, winning 32-27 in Houston, moving to a 3-8 record, and now the Texans are 7-5. And the biggest takeaway, really, we're going to focus on the Texans for the most part here. I mean, shout out to Will Levis, because like I said, he was sacked 8 times and still persevered and played an efficient game, completed 18 out of his 24 passing attempts, threw for 278 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and threw a pick 6. But like I said, the Titans persevered, and one underrated thing about them has been their defense all year. They're not a very good team, but their defense has been consistent, so it's a good one for the Titans. But realistically, they're still going to be probably drafting very high, but to potentially be adding a weapon for Will Levis, so that's good news for them. But for the Houston Texans, we're really going to focus on them because it's tough. They had AFC Championship to Super Bowl expectations before the season started. Of course, they've been dealing with some injuries. Didn't help that Jalen Petrie got hurt in this game and probably out for the season, so prayers up for him for sure. But they don't look good, and it's the same constant issues. Not just the play calling. I know a lot of Texans fans are mad at Bobby Slowick, but the offensive line, the penalties that constantly definitely bring back a lot of chunk plays and explosive plays that they could have had on the table. But that's one thing, and really a big thing people are going to talk about is Fairbairn missing that 29-yard field goal. Yeah, that was tough, not gonna lie. That's a bunny for most kickers, but hey, pressure burst pipes sometimes. And then it didn't help that low-key CJ Stroud pulled a Dan Orlovsky walking out the end zone, leading to a safety, and the Titans win. So that was bad. We do have to talk about CJ Stroud in a sense. Some people have called it a sophomore slump. He definitely hasn't been close to the player that he was last year, but he's still a franchise quarterback. And if we're being real, no one expected the Texans to do what they did last year anyway. So I know a lot of people had those expectations, and they didn't have expectations last year. That's what I talked about before the season. There was no expectations for the Texans before the season last year, and they were able to overachieve. And this season there were expectations, and now it's a little tough when teams have some film on you, when injuries happen. And there's been some things that CJ Stroud covered up with his play last year from all the offensive line penalties, and there's been some success with Joe Mixon running the ball and things of that nature. But Joe Mixon didn't play good at all in this game though. Had 14 carries only for 22 rushing yards. So like I said, that's a testament to that Titans defense. Like CJ Stroud, he didn't have bad numbers, but like I said, in some ways it was kind of empty stats because threw 2 picks, completed 29 33 passing attempts. That's sufficient. 247 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, with those 2 picks hurt them. It's tough right now, and they could potentially be some first round exits. They're going to win their division most likely in the AFC South because I don't think the Colts are going to catch them, and they beat the Colts both times they played them anyways. But you look at some teams that could potentially be wild cards in the AFC: the Broncos, the Chargers, the Ravens. But I think the Ravens are still going to win the division. That's my opinion, but we'll see about that. If not the Ravens, the Steelers. You can make the argument that all those teams could potentially beat the Texans in the first round, so that's going to be interesting. So the Texans are 7-5 right now. They're ahead of their division, but they don't look good right now. Another crazy finish right here that went to overtime as the Minnesota Vikings beat the Chicago Bears 30-27, a divisional game. Vikings are now 9-2, and now the Bears have lost their 5th game straight after starting the season 4-2. They are now 4-7. But I will say they definitely had opportunities to win this game. One thing also though, Caleb Williams, he had a really good game, but I think that they had him throw the ball way too much. Attempted 47 passes, completed 32 out of them, which is really efficient and good. Threw for 340 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but like I said, I think he threw the ball too much in this game. Not enough balance, and they weren't really able to establish anything in the running game. DeAndre Swift only had 30 rushing yards. Caleb Williams had 33 rushing yards too, but not really anything significant there. So that's a head scratcher to me, but the Bears still found a way to lose the game, and I think that there's no question that Matt Eberflus, this is probably going to be his last year coaching in Chicago just because of the circumstances, and it's not enough. And it's a tough thing because most likely Caleb Williams is going to be on his 3rd OC next year. I guess the biggest positive thing is that he's still young, so he'll be able to learn a system. But as an organization in Chicago, you want to put your quarterback, your franchise quarterback you drafted 1st overall, traded Justin Fields essentially, so Caleb could replace him. You want him to have stability. So yeah, roster wise it's a good team, but you need someone that can pull the best out of this roster to potentially exceed expectations and maybe even make the playoffs next year, because they aren't making it this year. But for the Vikings, it's a good win for them. It's tough because they're 9-2, but for some reason, I don't know, they did start off hot, but the Lions beat them in their matchup and are a better team, so it's kind of hard to gauge the Vikings right now, and the Packers too. Both teams in those divisions are 2-3, but they're still really dominant, so I don't know. But the Vikings, they look good. Jordan Addison had a really good game, had 8 receptions for 162 receiving yards and a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson had 7 receptions for 114 receiving yards. Sam Darnold was really efficient, completed 22 out of his 34 passing attempts, threw for 330 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And Aaron Jones, 22 carries, 106 rushing yards and a touchdown. And Justin Jefferson didn't even really have to do too much. Only had 2 receptions for 27 receiving yards, but everybody ate and they won the game, so that's the most important thing. So it's a good one for the Minnesota Vikings, and for Chicago, it's definitely gloom right now. Another wild finish of a game right here as the Dallas Cowboys beat the Washington Commanders, winning 34-26. No one expected this. Y'all know y'all didn't. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a Cowboys fan, but I'm gonna be objective right now and be an analyst, and then flex a little bit, and then be a little excited because I'm not gonna lie, I wanted the Cowboys to really embrace the tanking, but it felt good to get a win after not winning in a month and a half, losing 5 straight. But anyways, man, I'm not gonna lie, the Commanders did not look impressive at all in this game. They let the Dallas Cowboys offense really drive down them in their first 2 possessions. They just so happened to have a blocked field goal on the first possession and then miss the field goal the second time from Brandon Aubrey, but they were able to get things together. The game was 3-3 at halftime too, so the Cowboys defense, they really stepped up in this matchup as well too. I don't know, a lot of people are gonna blame things on that Jaden Daniels rib injury that he had some games ago, but it's a combination of things because there's also a question mark if teams are starting to figure out Cliff Kingsbury's offense again. I don't know, only time will tell with that, because they started off hot being 7-2, but now they have been 2-3 in their last 5 games, and now they have a 7-5 record, and right now I believe they're the 7th seed in the NFC, and they're most likely not going to win the NFC East. I talked about the Eagles earlier, going to talk about their game later as well too. They just weren't impressive. Jaden Daniels didn't have the greatest game. I mean, he was able to create some plays. He had 74 rushing yards on 7 carries and threw for 275 passing yards. had 2 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. I guess 1 interception you can chalk up because it was a Hail Mary essentially, but still that first interception hurt. It just wasn't too impressive in my opinion. Terry McLaurin, he did have that receiving touchdown at the end of the game that looked like they were going to come back and win, but of course the Commanders missed their field goal. Commanders missed the extra point, and then the Cowboys had another kick return touchdown after Kevontae Turpin had that first one that really sealed the deal. Had 2 of those, so man, that was crazy. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm happy as a Cowboys fan, but like I said in the intro, I still think this team is not good, and I'm not worried about jinxing them or anything, but I'm not gonna lie, they probably will beat the Giants on Thanksgiving, so they could end up being 5-7, but as long as they're in position to have a top 10 to 15 draft pick in the first round, I think that they will be in position to draft Ashton Jeanty because that's a huge need, and really build out the roster because realistically they're not going to do anything significant this year. But yeah, they won the game. The Commanders, like I said, they're probably on fraud alert. Make no mistake though, the Commanders, they have a bright future, and like I said about the Texans, they're ahead of schedule already. No one expected the Commanders to be this successful, so there's some consolation in that. But that game was wild though. It was 10-9 going into the 4th quarter and ended up being 34-26 at the end. That's crazy, but it's a good win for Dallas for sure. The Miami Dolphins have been looking really good lately. They blew out New England Patriots, winning 34-15, moving on to a 5-6 record, and they have a game on Thanksgiving against the Green Bay Packers too, which is really gonna say a lot in terms of them climbing back into the playoff picture. But the Miami Dolphins offense, they were cooking for sure. Tua coming back with a vengeance after everyone was saying that, oh, he needs to retire, all the concussions, things of that nature, which I'm sure he appreciates the people's concern, but he loves the game of football and he worked his whole life to be an NFL starting quarterback, and he's showing people why. Completed 29 out of his 40 passing attempts, threw for 317 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. The passing game really went crazy. Let's go down the line. Jalen Waddle had 8 receptions for 144 receiving yards and a touchdown. Jonnu Smith, who had a really good game in week 11, had 9 receptions for 87 receiving yards and a touchdown. Devon Achane didn't have the most rushing yards, but was able to get 2 receiving touchdowns as well too. Tyreek Hill had 48 receiving yards. Still trying to get him all the way back in. Apparently he had a wrist injury from that arrest that happened before the week 1 game. But man, when the Miami Dolphins offense is clicking, they can be really dangerous. And like I said, they're climbing back into the playoff picture slowly but surely. But that Green Bay game is going to be huge on Thanksgiving on Thursday. For the Patriots, not really surprised by this outcome. The biggest thing that you can take as a consolation for the Patriots is that you know that you have your franchise quarterback, but you're going to have to fill out the roster and add some more weapons and some more consistency to help him. But Drake May completed 22 out of his 37 passing attempts for 222 passing yards, a touchdown, and interception. Nothing too crazy, but we've been encouraged from seeing him all year. The whole conversation was letting him sit behind Jacoby Brissett for the whole season. They couldn't do that, which I'm glad they didn't. They let him start some games, and he's been able to look really good. So that's a good thing for New England. But like I said, the Dolphins, be on the lookout for them, because if they can continue to string some wins together, they'll be back in the playoff mix. But make no mistake, the Buffalo Bills are winning that division again. But it's a good win for Miami. I talked about this game a little bit in the intro. The Kansas City Chiefs narrowly defeated the Carolina Panthers, winning 30-27, moving on to a 10-1 record. Before diving into the Chiefs though, shout out to Bryce Young, shout out to the Panthers, making this game super competitive. Yes, they have a 3-8 record right now. Hasn't been the greatest season at all, but I think that time on the bench really helped Bryce Young. Completed 21 out of his 35 passing attempts, threw for 263 passing yards and a touchdown. Against the Kansas City Chiefs defense that's one of the best in the league, Chuba Hubbard, he didn't have the most rushing yards, had 58 rushing yards, but did have a touchdown and also had a 2-point conversion that tied the game up at 27. Which made things very interesting. David Moore also had a receiving touchdown too for the Panthers. So a really encouraging game for Carolina. I wonder if the conversation is going to be to potentially give Bryce Young another chance next year. It really just depends on how the rest of the season goes and how he plays, in my opinion. But I think it would be wise for them to draft a weapon like a wide receiver in the first round probably, because they're going to have a high draft pick still. But a good game from them. But for the Kansas City Chiefs, the conversation with them is, oh, they're barely beating these teams in the way that they're winning point differential, things of that nature. Ultimately, they're winning the game at the end of the day. And the reason why I think they're a little bit different than the Eagles last year that were winning all those games by 1-score margins, or even the Vikings in 2022 who lost in the first round as well too, like the Eagles who won all those games in the regular season in 1-score margins, is that they have Patrick Mahomes, they have a championship level defense, and they still have people like Isaiah Pacheco still hurt. That's really beneficial in the running game. A lot of people underrate how beneficial Isaiah Pacheco is to that offense. They do have some exterior offensive line issues with their tackle situations, so that's very important, and that'll be something to monitor for sure going into the rest of the season and into the playoffs. But for the Chiefs though, they're different than those Vikings and Eagles teams because they've been battle tested. They have 3 championships in the past 5 years and they're trying to three-peat. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough because you have the Bills. You have still a team like the Ravens, teams of that nature, and even in NFC, if they were to make the Super Bowl, you have to potentially be on the lookout for the Eagles or the Lions too, so that won't be easy, but it's different for the Chiefs in my opinion. You have Patrick Mahomes who continually makes plays, whether it's in the postseason or in the biggest moments, to find a way to win, so I would just dial back saying that they're similar to those teams, but yeah, they got the win.
Mayfield doing the Tommy DeVito.
Tampa Bay, they might have a chance to still win the division. I know they lost both of their matchups against the Falcons, but they look good in this game. But a lot of people look good against the Giants as they won 30-7, moving on to a 5-6 record, and the Giants are now 2-9. Not talking too much about the Giants, but after really cutting Daniel Jones, we knew what time it was. They're tanking. They're embracing the tank. Like I said, the Cowboys need to. Starting Tommy DeVito. I mean, come on now. And I'm not gonna lie. If you were gonna bench Daniel Jones, you're supposed to start Drew Lock, who has been QB number 2 for the whole season. So that's really messed up. I'm not surprised there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers ate their offensive live, and they had a touchdown in the second half, but really it was meaningless. So we're not gonna spend too much time on them. The Giants, they're in shambles for sure. But for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they got back their number 1 wide receiver and their best wide receiver in franchise history, and Mike Evans. Slowly working him back in. He needs, I think, around 700 yards to have an 11 straight for 1,000-yard receiving season. That's gonna be a hard task, but if anyone can do it, it's him. The main focus for them though is to try to be back in the playoff picture. But talking about how they played, balance, that's the biggest takeaway from this game for Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield completed 24 out of his 30 passing attempts, threw for 294 passing yards, no passing touchdowns, but had a huge rushing touchdown. Was talking his ish and even did the Tommy DeVito celebration, the cutlet celebration. That was funny. Bucky Irvin, 12 carries for 87 rushing yards and a touchdown. Rashad White had a touchdown. Sean Tucker also had a touchdown too. So they were just able to dominate in all facets of the game, offensively and defensively, and as a better team, they won. So it's a good win for Tampa Bay. We'll see if they're able to climb their way back into the playoff picture. It'll be hard to win a division, even though, like I said, I don't think the Falcons are all that, honestly. They had a bye week, but how they lost to the Broncos and then the week before against the Saints, I just really don't take the Falcons too seriously. So anything's possible, but it's a good win for the Bucs. Moving on to talk about the Detroit Lions, who their only loss was against Tampa Bay. The Lions won this game 24-6 against the Indianapolis Colts, moving on to a 10-1 record. Now the Colts are 5-7, and I'm surprised the Lions didn't score 40 or 50 in this game. I mean, they do it every other week, so it's just crazy watching their offense dominate. Still a blowout win in this game, I would say. And Jared Goff continues his efficient play in his MVP caliber season, completed 26 out of his 36 passing attempts for 269 passing yards, no passing touchdowns. But like the Buccaneers game, like I talked about a second ago, they had balance. Jahmyr Gibbs had 21 carries for 90 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. David Montgomery had a touchdown, and their defense was able to limit the Indianapolis Colts. Weren't really able to do anything, and Anthony Richardson had a poor completion percentage, only completed 11 out of his 28 passing attempts for 172 passing yards. So not really too much to talk about. They had a good win in week 11 against the New York Jets, but the Jets, we know how bad they are. Yeah, not too much to talk about. But for the Lions though, I talked about in the intro about the Eagles too. I think that those two teams, the Lions and the Eagles, are the upper echelon of NFC right now. A lot of people are going to say that the Lions, they will probably pick them to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl rather than the Eagles, but I'm not too quick on that because the Eagles, they've been to the Super Bowl, and now having Saquon Barkley, who's having an MVP caliber season, legit MVP caliber, and I'll talk about that later. That's going to be tough, but we can pray that we get that for the NFC Championship game because that would be an amazing matchup. But the Lions, they've been dominant all year, and it's a good win for them. It's crazy because the Denver Broncos were actually losing in the third quarter, but they were able to get things going defensively and offensively, which we'll talk about. Bo Nix having a really good game as they beat the Las Vegas Raiders, winning 29-19. Bo Nix, like I said, he is low-key chasing Jaden Daniels right now for that Offensive Rookie of the Year, and there's still 5 games left in the season, so don't sleep on that. But Bo Nix completed 25 out of his 42 passing attempts, threw a lot like Caleb Williams did on Sunday, so I don't like that, but had 273 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. They weren't really able to get anything going in the running game. That's why he attempted so many passes, but like I said, Bo Nix, he had looked really good this year. My boy Mitchell kind of compared him to Dak Prescott coming out of college, and low-key, that's an accurate comparison, I would say. He's been really efficient with the football, has been the perfect quarterback for Sean Payton, and they've been seeing huge dividends from that. Portland Sutherland had 8 receptions for 97 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Von Vale had 6 receptions for 80 receiving yards, and Marvin Mims had 3 receptions for 44 receiving yards. So good balance offensively, defensively, they played really good. Talking about the Raiders really quick right now. Prayers up for Gardner Minshew. It looks like he's going to be out for season with a broken collarbone, I believe. That sucks because he didn't have a bad game. He had 230 passing yards, a touchdown and interception as well, but man, that sucks. But also prayer for Raiders fans because they're probably going to have to watch Desmond Ridder start. No offense to him, but yeah, like I've continued to say, Shedeur Sanders is the quarterback for them because the Raiders are not going to matter at all until they get a quarterback. But hey, Jacoby Myers had a good game. But anyways, it's a good dub for Denver. The Seattle Seahawks are now number 1 in the NFC West as they got a win over the Arizona Cardinals, winning 16-6. Both of these teams are now 6-5, and it wasn't the prettiest of games at all. Like I said, very low scoring, but I will say one thing that really flipped the game was a pick 6 that the Seattle Seahawks got from Kyler Murray throwing a very questionable pass. That's going to be interesting because both of these teams play again in week 14, so one can make the argument that'll be essentially for the division because, not gonna lie, the 49ers, we'll talk about them soon, they're just too injured right now in my opinion to do anything, and you're seeing a war of attrition with them, all the extra games they played in the postseason. I think that they're not gonna make the playoffs, but we'll talk about that soon. But focusing on this game, the Seahawks, not really anything too crazy. Like I talked about in the previous weeks though, Jackson Smith and Jigba, man, he has been a really good wide receiver, and a lot of people knew that coming out of Ohio State, but he's a perfect complementary receiver to DK Metcalf. Has 6 receptions for 77 receiving yards and a touchdown. Geno Smith threw for 254 passing yards, completed 22 out of his 31 passing attempts for a touchdown and interception. So they're finding ways to win, and shout out to Mike McDonald. That defense defense really coming into their own. Remember, the Seahawks started off 3-0 to the season, had a rough stretch, but have been able to get things back going well. And right now, if they win in week 14 against the Cardinals, they're going to be in position to win the NFC West as long as they're able to win a majority of the rest of their games this season. And for the Cardinals, they still have a chance, man. But coming off the bye, the Seahawks had a better game plan and they were able to execute better. So they had nothing going in the running game. James Conner only had 8 rushing yards. Benson only had 18 rushing yards. McBride, I will say, who was one of the most underrated tight ends in the league, had 12 receptions for 133 receiving yards. But yeah, just not a good game at all from Arizona. But it's a good win for Seattle, and right now they're poised to win their division. Now, talking about the 49ers, they took a loss to the Green Bay Packers as the Packers won 38-10. A huge blowout, a rematch of the NFC divisional round last year, kind of. It was in Green Bay. Also, a lot of key players from the 49ers did not play in this game. Brock Purdy, their quarterback, being one of those key players. Also, Nick Bosa was out. Trent Williams was out too. So it wasn't the same at all, but the Packers still won, and now they have an 8-3 record. The 49ers are now 5-6. And talking about the 49ers real quick before focusing on the winning team and the Packers, I'm not surprised it turned out like this. No offense to Brandon Allen, but it was kind of a tall task to ask Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers to have a successful game plan with Brock Purdy not in the lineup and still working in players like a Christian McCaffrey, who started off slow, but obviously so because he came back a few weeks ago before the bye week. Wasn't really able, still trying to work things in, and there's not really too much to play for now. I mean, obviously they're going to try to climb their way back into the playoff picture, but I believe they have a 1-3 divisional record right now in the NFC West. That digs them into a hole already. So I don't know. It's a matter of attrition with them. They played so many playoff games throughout the years. They made the Super Bowl last year. In the 2022 season, they made the NFC Championship game. 2021, the NFC Championship game. Missed the playoffs in 2020, but in 2019-20 made the Super Bowl as well too. So just all the wear and tear, I think that it's starting to take a toll on the team, and it's a tough thing because you have so many Super Bowl windows, so many opportunities to win a championship, especially in the current salary cap era too, when players have to be extended and things of that nature. So that's going to be one thing to talk about it for the 49ers, but that's a tough thing. But for the Green Bay Packers, they look really good in this win. Shout out to Josh Jacobs, man. Had 26 carries for 106 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. Also broke 15 tackles. That's insane. He has been a huge strong suit for the Green Bay Packers offense this year, making things easier for Jordan Love, who really didn't have to do too much in this game. Completed 13 out of his 23 passing attempts, threw for 163 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. It's a good game overall for the Green Bay Packers. Also, Xavier McKinney got his 7th interception of the season, so that defense is looking good with defensive coordinator Jeff Hapley in his first season there. Might be taking some head coaching interviews potentially in the offseason too, because Green Bay has looked really good. It's going to be hard to gauge on how they finish in the playoffs too, because I talked about them in Minnesota. They're not going to win a division most likely, but they'll still be playoff threats. So Pack Nation looked good in this game for sure.
I'm going to have a tough time sleeping if Saquon goes to Philadelphia, I'll tell you that. As I've told you, just being honest. I've been around enough players, so, but he's the most popular player we have by far.
I talked about it in the intro. You see the thumbnail. Saquon freaking Barkley. That's the biggest takeaway from this game. The Philadelphia Eagles dominated the Los Angeles Rams, winning 37-20, moving on to a 9-2 record. That's besides the point though. Saquon Barkley has been easily the best free agent signing of this offseason, and man, the freaking Giants, bro. They let him walk to the Eagles for free, bro. But anyways, that's besides the point. Had 26 carries for 255 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. But not only that, he also had 47 receiving yards too, accounted for 300 yards of offense. That is diabolical. That's insane. Not to mention also a player like AJ Brown had 6 receptions for 109 receiving yards and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts played efficient, completed 15 out of his 22 passing attempts for 179 passing yards and a touchdown. But that's besides the point. I want to continue to talk about Saquon Barkley because we're really just gonna focus on that because he is a legit MVP candidate. I talked about him probably being a runaway favorite for Offensive Player of the Year. Yeah, that's probably true too. But in a year where quarterbacks have dominated, don't get me wrong, Josh Allen particularly right now, and Lamar Jackson, even Jared Goff, I talked about it a little bit earlier too. If there's a year for a different position like a running back to win the MVP, it's going to be this year with Saquon. He has really revitalized and changed in the way that they play. And this season already, he has almost 1,400 rushing yards, has 10 rushing touchdowns on 223 carries. I mean, he's just been a huge boost for this team. The biggest reason why I wouldn't be surprised that the Eagles could potentially beat the Lions. Honestly, the Lions have looked very dominant this year, but the Eagles have too. No one's talking about how they've won 7 games in a row. So that's one thing right there. It's just a huge props to Howie Roseman and just this team really building out their roster. Also their defense too, with Vic Fangio being a defensive coordinator there. Players like Cooper DeJean, Reed Blankenship, Quinyon Mitchell. They just have a lot of depth defensively from the secondary with Jalen Carter, Davis, all all those players, Nakobe Dean, they just look really good right now. For the Rams, they still have a chance in the NFC West like I talked about. Those other teams are 6-5 with the Cardinals and the Seahawks. But realistically, we kind of knew what time it was in this game with the Eagles. They're hot right now and they look dominant. And Saquon Barkley is a legit MVP candidate. Also, we got to give credit to Nick Sirianni too, because he has been able to rebuild the culture that really fell on its face last year too. So the Eagles, they look nice right now.
Jackson keeps. Jackson to the edge. Touchdown Ravens.
The final game for NFL Week 12 was a matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Los Angeles Chargers, the Harbaugh Bowl, and the Baltimore Ravens were able to win 30-23. A really dominant game from the Ravens, but at first the Chargers were up 10-0, and it kind of reminded me of earlier in the season when the Ravens were down 10-0 against the Buccaneers, and they just ended up going off, and it was kind of a replication, and it was kind of a replication in sorts to this game. We can go through the stat line real quick. Lamar Jackson completed 16 out of his 22 passing attempts, threw for 177 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, including one of Mark Andrews and one to Rashad Bateman. Derrick Henry had a dominant game. He saw what Saquon Barkley did and wanted to get in his bag some, and he had 24 carries for 140 rushing yards. No touchdowns, but had a huge impact on that game. It was able to bludgeon the Chargers defense. Justice Hill also had a 50-yard rushing touchdown too, and he had 55 rushing yards on 4 carries. And Lamar Jackson also had a rushing touchdown too. So a lot of good balance from the Ravens, and a good bounce back win after losing to the Steelers in Week 11, and they move on to an 8-4 record. And switching gears to the Los Angeles Chargers, like I said, they started off hot, but Ravens offense, they were able to really take command, and their defense stepped up too, even without Roquan Smith in the lineup. Players like Kyle Hamilton and the defense overall, under defensive coordinator Zach Orr, were able to get things together and limit the Los Angeles Chargers offense. Justin Herbert completed 21 out of his 36 passing attempts, threw for 218 passing yards but no touchdowns. J.K. Dobbins left the game early with an injury, and hoping that he's okay. Justin Herbert did have a rushing touchdown though, and Gus Edwards had a rushing touchdown as well too. But like I said, but for the Chargers, they've been having a really resilient season. No one expected them to have the success that they've had under Jim Harbaugh. So it's a credit to how their culture has really changed, and they have similar personnel to the Ravens, of course, with both Harbaugh brothers being coaches in the league. But now John Harbaugh got another win over his little brother in Jim, to a 3-0 record now. But it was a really good game and a great finish to NFL Week 12. I appreciate you guys watching. Always make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss. Also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss2 for cooking videos, shorts, reels, all types of content, things of that nature. Know that you are loved. God loves you. You matter. You are beautifully and wonderfully made. You have purpose. Yeah, y'all have a good one. Happy early Thanksgiving. Grateful for y'all always, and thankful for y'all as well too. And y'all be blessed.